We're happy to introduce the next speakers from the Understory Initiative. Kathryn Prive is the Executive Director, and Tuula Rebhahn is the Seed Partnerships and Operations Manager. And they are going to speak about strategies for engaging community members in seed-based restoration from start to finish. And just a reminder to participants, if you have questions, to put them into the Q&A chat box in Zoom. And now you guys can get started.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Kathryn, and I just wanted to point out that we have a little bit of a fun, I hope, icebreaker poll. We're trying to get everyone into a bit of a right brain mode a little bit, so take a moment to fill that out, and we will have a little summary at the end of the talk. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Kathryn Prive. I'm a founder and executive director of the Understory Initiative, as well as a founder of the Rogue Native Plant Partnership that started in 2017. And I would think of myself as an ecologist. I'm also, run a nonprofit, and I'm also a systems thinker. And so that's kind of how I'm approaching this talk today, thinking about systems. And my hope for today is that we all walk away with a bit of expanded thinking about partnership and how that relates to ecosystem restoration. And Tuula, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Tuula and I work with Kathryn here in Southwest Oregon in the Rogue Valley region, also with Rogue Umpqua Native Plant Partnership just to the north of us. I work to get seeds on the ground and community members engaged with habitat restoration work. And I would say I'm a very values-driven person, and I've been thinking a lot this winter about what values go into forming partnerships and making partnerships work. So that kind of inspired our talk today. Kathryn, you want to take us to the next slide? So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about the values that we bring to our work and how they contrast with some of the more mainstream values that we see in our society today. And we're also going to be talking about giving this a more concrete example with a case study of how we go out and work with native plant material producers here in Southwest Oregon. I'll let Kathryn kick it off talking about the guiding values part one.
Yeah, so I just want to recognize, why aren't we talking about science? Why are we talking about values? And I think for me, the reason I came to this was not at the beginning with this approach, but it sort of came to me organically. So I think that we're in a place realistically where we don't have scientific answers to a lot of the questions we face, especially when we're talking about climate change and all the issues we're trying to solve as ecologists and plant restoration practitioners. And we just don't have those answers at the time to find them. And so a lot of it, our decisions day to day have to be almost from a gut feeling. And I think that the best way to approach that is through values. So I'm hoping to at least speak to our values and what we found to be really helpful as we've built multiple plant partnerships in Southwest Oregon, and have done a lot of, I think, effective work. So the first value that I think is worth talking about is the idea of collaboration. And the way I define this is no one has all the power and no one takes all the risk. I think this is very important to use when you're approaching restoration in general and working with community members. So the case study I want to talk about today that exemplifies how we approach this kind of in a nuts and bolts fashion is example from our work with the BLM in the Medford district. So when I started as a partnership coordinator, as a master's student in 2017, part-time, it became apparent that there was sort of this like backdoor way that other organizations besides the BLM would get access to seed. And so the whoever was since the 90s in those positions as the botanist in that region would try to sell excess seed, give away excess seed, provide other groups with ecological coaching, helping with seed mix development. And it was kind of this like sort of side project or thing they weren't necessarily supposed to do. And so when I came on to be a partnership coordinator, I saw it as my job to make all of that activity come in through the front door as opposed through the side door. And so I think that this collaboration of working with not just the federal partners who are funding the partnership, but making seed available to local restoration groups who are nonprofits, individuals, has been really valuable, and it has actually proved dividends for like everybody involved, not just the folks who are gaining access. So basically, we came to a solution where we went from this black market seed situation, roughly, to sort of a public-facing annual seed sale. Hundreds of species have been sold. We've sold about 600 pounds to date over the last couple of years. Every year we have 30 to 60 different species available. All of them are locally collected or produced with local genetics. And prior to this work, the only seed that was really available was what was sort of excess from the BLM, and that was pretty minimal, and it was not program and project specific. So that's a big achievement, and I think it's all because of this idea and ethic of collaboration. So Tuula, you are going to talk about responsiveness and flexibility.
Thank you. Yeah, the way that I think about responsiveness and flexibility is to listen. And our major goal with the Rogue Native Plant Partnership has just been getting everyone at the same place, or same time, and talking about what their needs are and for native plant materials. My case study for this is a long series of events that started back in 2019 when restoration practitioners and the riparian areas started coming to us saying, we don't have any locally sourced plant materials for our projects. A lot of the plant materials for Southwest Oregon are being sourced from areas to the north of us, which is the opposite of what we want to do for climate change mitigation and adapting to hotter and drier conditions. So we put out a seed collection contract through the Rogue Native Plant Partnership with another botanical group out here that does seed collection, and they were really successful. They came back with pounds of seeds and berries, some of them clean, some of them not. And then what happened in the fall of 2020 was we had some major wildfires here, and one of them went through a riparian area that's a pretty public-facing major urban riparian corridor. And the push for restoration was loud, and it was very insistent. And we were able to turn those seeds around really quickly and get them to local growers so that they could actually start providing some native plant materials that had actual genetic material from the Rogue region to put into that very prominent public-facing project. And then we've continued with woody species, native plant material collection, and we've been doing it in-house so that we can track all of our collection sites and make that information more publicly available so that growers can go out and do their own collections as well. And it allows us to stay flexible and responsive to changing needs and new suggestions for different species that maybe aren't traditionally used in riparian restoration, but are becoming more and more awareness around those species is growing of what actually grows in riparian zones here as opposed to the larger Pacific Northwest.
Thanks, Tuula. So I'm going to pick back up talking about this idea of ecological accountability and rigor. Wow, ecological accountability, it's kind of a heavy one, and it's something I take very seriously. I have a saying with my other staff members that our only boss is the ecosystems and the living places that we serve. And I really believe in that. And that, I think, is what I mean by this accountability. And I also think that to be accountable, we need to approach complex systems with complex solutions and nuanced and sort of multifaceted approaches. There's no simple answer to a really complex question. So the case study I want to talk about has to do with species prioritization. And this is actually a skeleton in my closet. I'm excited to share with you all so that you can learn from what I learned as a young partnership coordinator. So quickly, as coordinator for the Rogue Native Plant Partnership, I realized that we needed to have a list of priority species. That's kind of one of the main things most partnerships do. And as somebody who struggles still with imposter syndrome, I wanted to hide any of my decisions behind a mountain of data. And so I came up with this plan to basically scour the internet for species lists from all the ecoregions that we serve. So we have 7 different ecoregions in our area that we do restoration work on. And then within each of those, look at specific habitat types, so riparian, wetland, upland, oak ecosystem, mixed conifer forest, and find species lists for all of those, put them in a giant spreadsheet, and then hand that spreadsheet off to restoration practitioners and have them basically grade species by species which ones they thought were important to restoration, easy to produce, yada, yada, yada. I got a whopping 2 responses. And to me, that was a lesson in maybe there's other ways to get this information. Maybe a conversation with people who have this knowledge is better than just bombarding them with a spreadsheet. Maybe there's some kind of combination of approaches that we better. And then I also sat down and I tried to take the survey myself. And I tried with my sort of blooming ecological knowledge, fill it out. And I found myself, it was hard to breathe while I was trying to fill it out because it was so overwhelming to choose which species is important, which one is not. So that was a real big learning lesson for me. And I think it kind of speaks to this ecological accountability and kind of what we're up against. And so again, the solution I'm talking about here is somewhat messy. It's a combination of using data, expert opinion, even sometimes just experience and a hunch or a feeling, a relationship with the land, and then being able to analyze it in various ways, and even just use regular old human intuition. And I think this also emphasizes how important it is to just have regular discussion and adaptability when you're approaching these problems. Okay, so the last value, abundance and transparency. To me, this is about rejecting scarcity and this idea of proprietary information and that there's scarcity around information in general. I think that that really stops progress in all ways. So the picture here you see, this is a plant we love in Southwest Oregon called Waiethia. And I'm going to talk about a case study that has to do with this plant that kind of shows how this mindset of abundance and transparency can actually help reach our goals. So this is a species that takes sometimes 7 years to produce its first seed. It was in production at a Forest Service nursery in Southwest Oregon, J. Herbert Stone Nursery, and for multiple years and didn't produce. And so therefore the expense to the BLM was extremely expensive. And so they decided to tear the bed out and put something in more productive, which makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. When I heard about this, I had a feeling that I needed to go and save those plants. So we worked with the nursery to lift the beds instead of just tilling them under. We got volunteers out to salvage the Waiethia rhizomes. We found a local partner who had some greenhouse and watering space to be able to hold them over. And then we found a local grower who eventually would plant those plants at his farm. And I think Gary's in the audience with Long Shadow Fields. So the middle picture there is that bed of Waiethia after it had been salvaged and it started to bloom after a couple more years on Gary's farm. And then at the bottom is some of the seed that was harvested from there. And to me, this shows this abundance thinking of, yeah, it probably is a little ridiculous to go out and salvage a couple hundred Waiethia plants when what we're trying to restore are hundreds and thousands of acres. But I think you need all of it. And I think you need to do those little things that make no sense. And then you also need to have millions of pounds of grass seed produced in a really efficient way as well. And And then I think that another reason that our program has been successful is lifting up growers like Gary and providing tools that empower both practitioners and growers to produce and do seed development in a thoughtful and productive way, and making sure that they're using source identified, locally adapted seed. So just as a summary, what I'm kind of talking about here is a move from competition and sort of immediacy to collaboration and long-term thinking, moving away from doing things from how it's always been done or a hierarchical model to responsiveness and flexibility, doing, instead of deliverable focused and people pleasing or people focused initiatives, really having ecological accountability and rigor, and then moving away from scarcity and proprietary thinking to abundance and transparency. So now Tuula is going to apply these values to working with growers in our region as an example of how all these values may come into play.
Thanks, Kathryn. I'm going to blaze through this so we have time for a couple question and answer. Can you advance? Thank you. So we're applying these values to our grower outreach strategy and breaking it down into 4 steps. And I just want to give a shout out to our awesome private lands program coordinator and ecologist, Vanessa Robertson-Rojas, who couldn't present today, but really gave us the brain dump on how she goes about recruiting growers. So these are her strategies, and I'm going to share them with you. I also wanted to quickly share the poll results. This is live from your responses. There are actually over 80 responses, and I had ChatGPT summarize them. What are the bottlenecks to appropriate native seed availability in your region? You can see that lack of vendors, lack of growers is a huge issue for a lot of you. So I'm glad that we're focusing a little bit on this today. So the first value that we're going to apply is through step 1 with transparency. This is the email phase. This is the getting out there and talking to folks. They usually come to us in our region. There's a lot of interest in growing native plant materials, but we have to vet and know if they are actually able to do what it takes to grow native seed. It's not easy, and there are a lot of potential roadblocks along the way. Let's zoom through all these, Kathryn. A couple of hard filters to call out is, do they have land and water available? Is it their land? Do they have permission to grow? And are they really motivated to grow native seed? Is it something that they can do? And is it something they can take the risks to do? Because it's often not profitable, especially in the first year or two. If all these things work out, it's a match. There's Kyle Poling, our fabulous native seed grower that also works with Understory Initiative. Okay, the next value that I want to apply is the ecological accountability and rigor, and that goes into step 2 when we physically visit a farm and talk to farmers and find out if their land is a good fit for native seed production. We like to look around to see what are the weed and pest management strategies being applied. Are they maintaining their land, and are they able to actually show us where they want to grow the native seed? Vanessa says no hand waving. Actually walk it out and see what the space is available and what the weed situation is like. There's a beautiful prepared bed that we recently visited in the Umpqua region. Step 3, obviously developing a contract has to be collaborative. I think we can skip through all the text on this one, Kathryn, unfortunately, without time, but we're happy to chat more with you guys. Any questions that you have. Yeah, shout out to the Plant Materials Center for actually creating real numbers for yields that we can apply to develop contracts with farmers. I think that's our time. I see Hollis coming back on, so I'm going to step off and thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Kathryn and Tuula. That was a really great presentation. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, so please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom and like them if you want to move them to the top of the list. So, okay, Tuula and Kathryn, the first question is, who are the customers of the seed sales? Are they private, landowners, landscapers, agencies, etc.?
All of the above, yes. And I saw another question about if seeds are given away or sold. And through the partnership, we do sell seed, but we also have another program through the Understory Initiative that provides free seed to farmers who are getting started growing native plants.
Awesome, thank you. This is the only question I'm seeing right now. Oh, here's another one. All right, what kind of first-year benchmarks do you ask for with a new grower?
Kathryn, do you want to take that one? I don't have anything coming to
I know
mind.
that benchmark is an appropriate, I think we think of it as a relationship and a learning opportunity both ways. And I think we try to cater what we do with growers to what their capacity is and what our needs are. And that is very different depending on the grower. You know, some folks grow at a pretty small scale and have an interest in a particular species or have experience with particular species. And so we try to hone in on their strengths and just support them through the whole process. And that also means finding ways to pay in advance for production and not just wait for a few years later when seed is produced, but support them throughout the whole way, both with, you know, financial support through the grant writing that we do, and then future seed sales, but also through technical advice and just being available to help even harvest and clean seed, things like that.
Thank you. Another question we have is, in your experiences, what's the best strategy to convince some conventional horticulturists to switch to growing native seed? Do the contracts help the most?
The contracting system has been helpful. I think time and not giving up and climate change, to be honest. In our area, we face a lot of drought. And so I think there's a lot of growers who simply don't have the water resources to grow vegetable seed crops or things that are a little bit more resource intensive. And so we offer them a more ecological option to remain growing, and we support them throughout the whole way. I think that the main thing that we've struggled with, or farmers have struggled with, is just there's too many little pieces that they can't put together on their own. And so they need the partnership model to bring all those pieces together in the right support structures so that they can be successful.
Thank you. One last question. How can federal land managers help encourage more suppliers to enter the nursery space? Our contract process is messy, but I think we can be somewhat flexible with low dollar agreements.
My vision is specifically, like the BLM, I know has a process called the IDAIQ, which allows growers to sort of bid for about a 5-year period on, you know, seed production in general, and it sort of reduces some of the contracting hassles. And what I'd really like to see happen is for some of these grower co-ops that is, you know, we exemplify in Southwest Oregon, to find a way for a partnership organization or some organization to jump through the hoops to get involved in some of those larger contracting opportunities on behalf of growers. So we don't have, you know, we have more representation or representation at all of smaller scale growers, but they also come with that institutional support of a collective and not feeling like they have to do it all on their own.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for questions right now. We will move the rest over to Tuula. That was an amazing presentation, Tuula and Kathryn. And now Sarah will introduce our last speaker of the day.
Thank you so much. That was a really great presentation.